Have you ever stopped to think about what really happens after we die? What if someone came back to tell the whole world that they had been given a deadline, a grim warning to avoid the end of July 2025? Today you'll hear the shocking story of Emily Carter, a 15-year-old girl who died for 6 minutes, was dragged to a place that was neither heaven nor hell, and returned screaming a warning impossible to ignore. Stay with us until the end to discover all the details of this terrifying experience and the message that could change the fate of millions. Like the channel to support it, subscribe so you don't miss any real stories like this, and comment below which city you're watching from. Let's see where this story goes. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 15 years old. I live in a small town on the shores of Lake Travis, Texas. I've always been the good girl, the one who gets good grades, obeys her parents, and is afraid to disobey even the wind. That July day, the heat was unbearable, the kind that makes the ground ripple on the horizon. My sister Sophie and I decided to swim in the lake to escape the oven that was our home. I still remember the feeling of the sun burning my shoulders, the smell of sunscreen mixed with the sweetness of wildflowers. The water seemed inviting, green, still, a mirror broken by a few rocks. There was something in the air that made the hairs on my arms stand on end, but I said nothing. Talking about foreboding to an older sister ends up being a joke, so I dove in. I went deeper than I should have, as always. I liked losing myself in the weight of the water, in the way the sound disappeared. Everything seemed calm, too calm. When I opened my eyes at the bottom, I saw only a darkness that clashed with the bright sun. I tried to come up, but felt something grab me. It was a hand, cold, bony. It pulled me down without hesitation. I kicked, flailed my arms, felt my lungs beg for air, but I couldn't let go. In a blink, the bubbles rose without me. I felt my heart skip a beat. I died, but I didn't black out. I was thrown out of my body. I found myself floating in the water, my hair like snakes around me. Sophie swam desperately, screaming my name, her tears mixing with the lake water, and me. I couldn't touch her. It was like glass between us. The lake disappeared. Suddenly, I was standing in a place that doesn't exist on maps. A cracked field, strewn with chalk-white bones. A purple sky with clouds that looked like pulsing arteries. The air smelled of smoke and iron. My feet sank into the dry earth, which creaked as if protesting my presence. It was there that I saw that I was not alone. There was a crowd walking aimlessly, dragging chains that didn't exist. They were crying blood. I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone. In the distance, something was forming in the mist, a shapeless silhouette, made of black smoke and blue lightning, that seemed to feed on the fear around it. And he saw me. He floated closer as if the ground couldn't hold him. I wanted to run, but my legs no longer truly existed. They were just intention, pure terror. I felt my spiritual body tremble like a mirror cracking. The air grew denser. The clouds in the sky pulsed at a rapid pace, as if time itself were racing. The being was impossible to describe with human words. It had no defined face. It was like living smoke, with lightning coursing through its non-existent veins. Instead of speaking, it projected sound directly into my mind, pushing the words as if plunging a hot knife into my brain. Emily Carter. I heard my name echo 1,000 times in 1,000 different voices. My knees sank into the gray dust. I tried to close my eyes, but there were no eyelids. Only constant vision. You shouldn't be here, but since you're here, you'll see. The ground split open with a dull crack. A deep, endless fissure exposed streams of red light, like living lava. I smelled burning flesh, even though I had no body. From the depths of this fissure, screams arose. Thousands, millions, a chorus of pure agony. I felt each wail as if it were my own, each death, each regret. It was as if he wanted to show me the weight of collective failure, the sum of all humanity's bad choices. I wanted to cover my ears, but they weren't there either. Do you want to know what's coming? The question wasn't real. It was an invasion. I couldn't say no. Immediately, the fissure spat out a scorching blast of wind. Images began to emerge. The sea rising without waves, swallowing entire cities in silence. Mountains crumbling like sugar in water. Children clutching the bones of adults. But the most horrifying thing was the sound. Nothing. Everything happened in absolute silence. A silent apocalypse. And then, in the sky cracked like old porcelain, a date appeared. It burned in embers, 31/7/2025. The flames formed living letters. The being writhed, as if feeding on my reaction. I wanted not to look, but I had no eyelids. By the end of July 2025, the threshold will be crossed. The phrase entered me like a slow poison. I felt a metallic taste in my spiritual mouth. I saw children holding hands forming circles in deserts, chanting in a forgotten language, "You will return to the other side." I started to cry, but the tears turned to smoke before they fell. "And you will warn." The order was not a request. It was a sentence. It was then that I felt an invisible force pull me upward. The scorched landscape shrank, dissolving like ink in water. I began to climb, but not to heaven, to another, even more terrible sight. Climbing effortlessly, weightlessly, I moved away from the cracked ground. Everything grew smaller, the people running soundlessly, the mist-like being receding, until it became a black dot in the lifeless desert. But it wasn't relief. It was an invitation to see more. Suddenly, there was no ground, no sky, no nothing. I was floating in space. The earth loomed below me, enormous, beautiful, and terrifying. At first it looked normal, clouds, oceans, continents illuminated by sunlight. But then the colors began to drain like blood from a cut. Blue turned gray, green turned dry brown. Rifts opened in the continents, slowly but unstoppably. Oceans retracted as if someone were sucking water through a cosmic straw. Mountains imploded inward, and it all happened in a silence that drove me mad. I screamed without sound. That's when I noticed a gigantic timer projected into space itself. Red numbers pulsed like hungry hearts. The countdown was decreasing. I understood without having to do the math. It would reach 0 in July 31, 2025. The feeling was clear. It was a deadline. It wasn't a vague prediction. It was a limit. A strange sound began to vibrate within me, not outside, but within my spirit. It was like the buzzing of a swarm of bees colliding with glass. Within this buzzing, disjointed phrases emerged. They forgot. They are not ready. Silence will be the judgment. I turned, trying to escape, but there was nowhere to go. The entire earth seemed to pull me in like a magnet, revealing horrific details. I saw cities in blue flames, not normal fire, but something cold that froze people alive. I saw churches crumbling as worshippers begged gods who wouldn't answer. I saw boiling seas with bodies floating like wax figures. But the most terrifying thing was seeing people standing still. No one screamed, no one cried. They just stared at the cracked sky, accepting the end with cowardly silence. The presence returned, that mist and lightning thing, but now larger, filling the space behind me. Until the end of July, the words sunk deep into my mind. I felt as if they were carved into my spiritual bones. The count is non-negotiable. The voice pushed me forward. More images forced me to see. A huge clock of light with bleeding numbers, spinning faster. Around it, thousands of candles were extinguished one by one. They must remember. The phrase reverberated like a sick mantra. My mind begged me to black out, to see nothing else. But I had no choice. That's when the vision changed once again, dragging me to another, even darker place. Suddenly, there was no more outer space. I was sucked into a spiral of black light, spinning endlessly as if being drawn into a funnel of shadows. I felt my being stretch and compress at the same time, a dull pain that wasn't physical, but felt worse than any broken bone. When the spiral opened, I found myself standing in an infinite hall. The walls were made of translucent stone that pulsed like living flesh. On every surface, faces appeared, but they had no mouths or eyes, just flickering outlines as if silently screaming. That place was alive. It was breathing. With each breath in the hall, I heard a multitude of soundless voices. Phrases floated in the air like ash. They won't listen. It's too late. Time rots. I wanted to run away, but something held me there. It was as if invisible hands were holding my spiritual wrists. The mist-like being appeared again, growing until it touched the invisible ceiling. Blue lightning streaked the floor. Each time it flashed, I saw horrific scenes projected onto the walls. Crowds kneeling as rust-colored skies exploded into leprous auroras. Children burying family photos in colorless deserts, oceans turning to stone, and always that date burning in everything. 31/7/2025. My mind wanted to close, but the being wouldn't let me. You will remember. You will carry it. The words vibrated within me like an earthquake. My spiritual body cracked, glowing fissures cutting through my ghostly skin. From each crack appeared symbols, written in an ancient language I didn't understand, but which hurt just trying to read. I tasted rust in my mouth, even without lungs. I coughed up blood like smoke. The being came so close that its lightning pierced me. I saw my family, my bedroom, my dog sleeping on the couch, all turning to dust on the same day. They have forgotten what they are. The entire hall shook. The voices changed tone. It was no longer lament. It was accusation. They deserve it. They overslept. The limit will close. I cringed, trying not to listen, but there were no earplugs for thoughts. Suddenly, all the walls began to bleed blue light, the same light as the creature. It flowed like living liquid until it formed a circle on the floor. Within it, as if floating on burning mercury, appeared the inscription 31/7/2025. The being spoke one last time, in a tone that tore through space. Let them know. Then everything collapsed. The hall shattered into 1,000 pieces of black crystal, pulling me along with it. I fell into an endless abyss, spinning, screaming, without a sound. But I didn't wake up. Not yet. I was forced to see more. I kept falling. Forever, it seemed. There was no end, no ground, no hope. The darkness wasn't just an absence of light. It was a thick, almost solid substance that enveloped me like an inverted womb. I tried to breathe and felt my throat close with a dry creak. And then there were voices. Not one, not 10, but countless, all speaking at once, each whispering in my ear, in my chest, behind my eyes. It was a chorus of intimate nightmares. They will beg not to remember. No one will believe you. They are already lost. Every sentence seemed to be spat out with calm hatred. I began to see things in the darkness, images projected onto a dense fog. I saw a creaking wooden church beneath a sky as red as raw flesh. Inside, the pews were filled with corpses sitting motionless, their hands clasped in prayer. At a makeshift altar, a child preached with his eyes hollowed out, repeating, July 31st, July 31st, July 31st. With each repetition, his body rotted faster, like fruit forgotten in the sun. I wanted to scream, but my voice was still stolen. The mist around me condensed and transformed into the creature, now more defined. It had a human form, but it wasn't human. Skin like smoked glass, within which ran blue fire. Eyes were completely white, pupilless. Its mouth moved soundlessly. Even without hearing it with my ears, I understood. There will be no explosions to warn them, no trumpets. It will come like a whisper, and when they realize it, it will be too late. The entire abyss trembled with that revelation. I began to see others, shadows of people floating around me, equally trapped, all with wide eyes, mouths sewn shut. I saw an elderly man with a beard stained with spiritual blood, a woman clutching her chest as if hiding a fatal secret, a child with her hands pressed to her ears, trying not to hear, and they all had something engraved on their foreheads. In flaming letters, it shone 31/17/2025. The creature extended its arm toward me. Its hand was a burning crystal claw. It touched my forehead, and I felt something brand into me, like a hot iron branding cattle. Blue smoke rose from my spiritual pores. The smell was horrible, like burning flesh mixed with rotten flowers. Then I felt the ground, a ground that wasn't there before. I fell to my knees on the ice-cold floor. The abyss disappeared, as if I'd been spat into another world. But I knew it wasn't over yet. There was still more to see, more to remember. When I opened my eyes, or whatever I used to see there, I realized I was lying in the center of a geometric room, with walls that didn't meet at right angles. Everything seemed alive, as if it breathed. It was an indescribable polygon, changing shape with every blink. The ground was a black mirror, reflecting not what I was, but what I feared. I saw my body floating dead in the lake, my eyes lifeless, my sister shaking me in despair. I saw my parents at the water's edge, screaming into the void, while my face floated like a broken doll. I cringed, trying not to look, but the ground was gluing my spiritual eyes shut. Suddenly, blue flames erupted from the living walls, but they weren't burning heat. They were burning memory. I felt every memory of mine exposed, ripped away like skin. Christmas with my grandparents, My first bike, the fight with Sophie over a stupid dress, everything was consumed in a silent flame. In place of memories, phrases appeared in a language I didn't speak but understood. The limit will not be avoided, it will be lived. Time waits for them. The final breath comes in silence. The creature was no longer in smoke form. It had become a woman. Her skin was pale as wet chalk. Her hair a mass of gray snakes writhing soundlessly. Her eyes were completely white, and yet I felt them piercing me to the core. She approached with a heavy gait, her feet sinking into the black mirror. With each step, cracks opened, and from them emerged more fiery phrases, 31/7/2025. When he got close, he raised one hand, and in the center of his palm, a pulsing blue flame appeared. Within it, like a nightmarish hologram, images danced, families kneeling in scorched fields, children holding extinguished candles, cities swallowed by sand, and always that date, pulsing like a warning, 31/7/2025. I felt my mind trying to flee, like a panicked animal, but there was nowhere to go. The eyeless woman spoke, not with a voice, but inside me. You will see what they don't want to see. You will remember what they choose to forget. She thrust the blue flame into my spiritual chest. I didn't feel warmth, I felt loss. Something inside me was sucked away, replaced by that icy fire. I began to cry without tears. My throat opened in a scream that no one could hear. She leaned in and, without moving her lips, poured out the sentence, "By the end of July, everyone will be weighed, and the scales don't lie." The flame within me burned brightly, and I felt my spiritual veins fill with fiery symbols. I looked away, but she grabbed me by the chin with long claws. "You will come back." Everything began to shatter again. The room imploded in a blue flash. I was sucked into nothingness. I found myself thrown into another space. I didn't fall. I didn't walk. I was simply spat there. It was a gallery with no ceiling, no visible walls, but with columns that stretched into infinity. Each column had moving engravings, like living canvases. As I approached, I saw scenes that chilled my soul. They were destinies, possibilities, a future that hadn't yet happened, or that would happen if nothing changed. On one of the columns, an entire city slept. The people lay in their beds, but the moon in the sky was cracked, bleeding a red light. A horrible sound of heavy breathing filled the air, and all those people slowly suffocated, never waking. In another, I saw a destroyed school. Children lay motionless, covered in white dust. The blackboards were scratched with the date, 31/7/2025 in giant letters, painted with something that looked like dried blood. I walked, or was I led, from column to column. Each one depicted a different tragedy, but they all shared the same time signature. I began to notice that the gallery was crowded. Faceless silhouettes of people shuffled along, all staring at their own columns. They wept silently. Some tried to cover their eyes, but their eyelids opened on their own like curtains. Suddenly, one of these figures grabbed me. Its spiritual fingers were thin bones, hard as frozen iron. It brought its eyeless face close to mine and whispered soundlessly, "We saw it too." Those words burned in my mind like acid, "But we don't talk." Then he turned into ash that fell to the ground and disappeared. I started running, even though I had no legs. Terror drove me. The columns grew more and more horrific. I saw mothers suffocating their own children to spare them from something worse. I saw priests on their knees, burning alive while praying. I saw oceans opening up to swallow entire cities, and in all of them, always, like a brand made with fire. 31/7/2025. Suddenly, a female voice echoed, coming from all sides, as if the columns were speaking to me. "You can't stop anything alone." I looked around in panic. There was no body to the voice. "But you can warn me." The ground cracked. I began to fall again, but now the wind smelled of burnt candles and rotting flowers. The blue light burning inside me seemed to laugh, dancing through my veins like electric snakes. I wanted to die for good, disappear, anything to never have to see again. But the voice whispered one last sentence before everything went dark. "Go back and tell them what you forgot to fear." I felt something pull me violently, and I was thrown to the next place. When I opened my eyes, or the consciousness that allowed me to see, I realized I was standing in a vast field. The earth was black as wet coal. There was no wind, no sound of insects, No rustling of leaves. It was a silence so profound it hurt my spiritual ears. The sky above was gray, swirling slowly like smoke from a fire, and on the horizon, a blue glow vibrated in irregular pulses. Each time it pulsed, I felt my chest tighten as if it were going to explode. I looked around. I wasn't alone. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of people were scattered across the field. Everyone had their eyes closed, murmuring silent prayers. Some knelt, others lay in the fetal position. But no one walked, no one screamed. It was like a mass wake before the dead arrived. The blue flame burned within my spiritual chest. I felt it vibrate like an otherworldly heart. Each pulse whispered the same phrase. July 31st, 2025. I began walking. The earth sank beneath my feet like raw meat. With each step, images appeared in the air. Familiar faces, my sister, my parents, my friends from school, all staring at me with a mixture of anger and fear. When I tried to talk to them, they didn't respond. Their mouths were sewn shut with red light. Then the serpent-haired woman appeared once more. She emerged from the ground, as if springing from death itself. She stood taller now, her completely white eyes shining like deathly beacons. Without moving her lips, she spoke into me. This is where everyone decides, even those who pretend they haven't. I trembled. I tried to take a step back, but the earth held me by the ankles like living chains. They have until the end of July. After that, the choice is made. The people around them began to scream soundlessly, their mouths opening impossibly wide, drawn as if spewing black light. The sky above flickered with blue lightning, illuminating their expressions of utter terror. The woman raised her hand and showed the blue flame, the same one that burned within me. But now it was cracked, bleeding a spectral white light. Within it, I saw deserted cities. I saw people sleepwalking, unable to cry. I saw an entire sea retreat, leaving behind a cracked ground covered in bones. And always, in the corner of visions, the date engraved in fire, 31/7/2025. The woman leaned over me, her pupil-less face pressed against mine. You will come back. With this inside you, you will speak, even if they call you crazy. The black roots on the ground began to wrap around my arms. The blue flame burned so brightly inside me that I felt my chest crack. Before I could scream, everything collapsed in a flash. I was sucked into nothingness once again. I felt as if I were being spit out by a hurricane, spinning weightlessly until I came to a halt, or rather, suspended in an indescribable space. There was no ground, no sky, just a thick mist that pulsed in shades of gray and blue. Within this mist floated symbols that burned like live coals. They were ancient, unfamiliar letters, but they translated directly into my mind with the weight of a sentence. July 2025 is the deadline. The words echoed, each repetition growing louder, like a hammer striking an infinite anvil. I tried to cover my spiritual ears, if such a thing existed, but the message penetrated every pore of my soul. I began to spin slowly in the air, and the mist parted like heavy curtains, revealing a courtroom without judges. There, all around me, floating platforms appeared, with people kneeling. Each one trembled in absolute silence. Some covered their faces. Others looked up with eyes dry from crying, and in the center, there was a huge clock. Its hands were serpents made of blue light. With each passing second, they writhed faster, biting each other, bleeding a horrible purple light. And on the clock face was engraved the end date, 31/7/2025. The white-eyed woman reappeared, floating before the display like a nightmare queen. Her mouth was a bottomless black slit. Without sound, she spoke to me inside my mind. No one will scream. No one will struggle. They will simply remember, or not. The platforms began to crack. People fell into the abyss that formed below them, but they fell without a sound, accepting their fate like lambs with their necks ready for the cleaver. I begged with desperate thought, what do I do? How do I report it? She came so close that I felt a spectral chill burning my spiritual skin. You will speak. Even if no one listens. The clock began to melt, its serpents oozing in rivulets of light that wrapped around me like chains. I felt my consciousness merging with the countdown, each number tattooed on my soul like a burning scar. I saw flashes of myself back in the world of the living, thrashing in the water, eyes glazed, chest heaving. I felt my heart failing, my brain burning from lack of oxygen, but the woman wouldn't let me back in yet. She held my face in her long, bony hands, her fingers digging into my mind. Tell them, avoid the end of July. Tell them, or they will be remembered as those who chose oblivion. My spiritual throat opened in a silent scream. Everything around me exploded into blue. I felt my physical body pulling me back violently. But before I left, I heard one last whisper, "Witness." Then I was thrown backward, into nothingness, into the hot, suffocating weight of the water. I didn't return to the lake gently. I was thrown into my body as if someone had pushed me off a cliff. Water rushed into my throat. My lungs imploded with pain. My chest burned, not from heat, but from sheer anguish. For a moment, I didn't know who I was. The memories of what I'd seen, what I'd been forced to see, overwhelmed reality. I lay in the muddy bottom, the blue flame still burning inside me. She didn't go out. I struggled to rise. My arms flailed in the water, uncoordinated, as if they weren't my own. I saw blurs of light on the surface, the distortion of the sun beckoning me back, but something was trying to pull me back, the same cold hand. Inside my mind, the sentences continued. Avoid the end of July. The sigh will be the judgment. 31/7/2025. I saw faces. Sophie screaming my name, her tears mixing with the waves. My father running along the shore, stumbling over the rocks. My mother falling to her knees. The blue flame burned brighter, as if it wanted to escape through my throat. I felt like if I didn't speak, it would kill me again. I opened my mouth, and a gush of water came out first, mixed with a wet, hoarse scream. It was a horrible, broken sound, but behind it came the sentence I could no longer hold back. Avoid the end of July. My body convulsed. I vomited more water. I coughed until my throat felt raw. With each breath, the phrase returned, as if written on my ribs. Hands pulled me out. I felt nails digging into my arms, strong arms trying to hold me, but I was shaking so hard I felt like I was made of wet paper. My heart was pounding like a war drum. My eyes were rolling around in their sockets, trying to find focus in the orange sky. But even there, in the seconds that seemed real again, I saw the black field, the columns of destinies, the hall of voices, the abyss of whispers. I felt something warm in my chest. I looked down and saw nothing, but it burned like a hot iron. The blue flame, it hadn't gone away. It was inside me. It pulsed with the same urgency. 31/7/2025. I sobbed, coughing up blood mixed with lake water. People shouted my name, but I didn't hear. I only heard that ancient deep whisper, impossible to ignore. Tell them. My hands were shaking. My teeth were chattering. But I opened my mouth again, without thinking, without wanting to. Avoid the end of July. It was the last sound I remember before I passed out again. But even in the darkness that swallowed me, the voice was still alive. She wouldn't let me forget. And I knew, with a cold, final fear, that there was no turning back now. I was the witness. If you enjoyed this beautiful spiritual testimony, please leave a like, comment, share your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.